Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, and in this presentation, moving away from the Treaty of Versailles so that you can cover all the peace treaties, I'm focusing on the Treaty of Sèvres, the treaty that dealt with the Ottoman Empire as well as Turkey itself. And I'm going to do so in two presentations, with a third looking at the Treaty of Lausanne. Though some important issues overlap, I'm going to use this presentation to focus first on the question of guilt, and then on the clauses of the treaty that dealt with the Arab lands of the Ottoman Empire, with a separate presentation focusing on Turkey's heartland. Let's first deal with the degree of guilt the Turks could be charged with. Now, the Ottoman Empire may have played a sordid role in the history of the Balkans, but it played no part in the direct cause of World War I. It joined the war in late October of 1914, hoping to regain lands it had lost in the Balkan Wars. It was Enver Pasha, the war minister, and the Young Turks he led, opposed to the Ottoman regime who had pushed for war. And it was German crewed ships transferred to the Ottoman Empire that attacked Russian Black Sea ports that ultimately dragged the Ottoman Empire into the conflict. So their entry into the war did extend the area of conflict considerably. It meant that the Black Sea was closed off, which led to British and Commonwealth troops landing on Gallipoli and the tremendous losses there to try and open up the Black Sea. And it meant that the war extended into the Middle East too. But the degree of guilt doesn't seem to be on the level of Austria-Hungary or Germany. However, they were guilty of the worst atrocities of the war, appalling atrocities committed against the Armenians. In the Caucasus in early April 1915, the Turks blamed them for siding with Russia, and tens of thousands of Armenian men were rounded up and shot, and hundreds of thousands of older men, women and children were driven out of their homelands and forced across the mountains into southern Turkey and even further into Syria. In Van province in the east of Turkey, more than 50,000 Armenians were murdered. Armenians were expelled from all over the Ottoman Empire. In total, more than 600,000 Armenians were massacred in 1915. And of those forced out of the Ottoman Empire and into the Syrian desert, more than 400,000 died on their pitiful trek. So that in 1915 more than 1 million had died. And in the summer of 1918, as the Turks moved into the former Russian Caucasus, another 400,000 Armenians were brutally massacred. Today, we would call it genocide or ethnic cleansing. Now, we should focus on the successes and failures of peacemaking, because that's the focus on your course guide. And even more specifically, it identifies territorial changes and demographic impact as of interest. Well, there's a lot to talk about with this regard, and none of it particularly good. The Turks lost all the lands of the old Ottoman Empire. In total, 2/3 of its pre-war territory, which in the spirit of self-determination seems entirely reasonable, except that there was in reality no self-determination. The British Protectorate of Egypt was recognised by the treaty. A national uprising in 1919 against the British protectorate won Egyptian independence in 1922, though Britain retained control over foreign affairs, defence and the Suez Canal. The other Arab lands of the old empire fared even worse. Hopes of independence dashed as they were placed under British or French protection under League of Nations mandates. Mesopotamia, essentially today's Iraq and Kuwait, Transjordan, essentially today's Jordan, and Palestine went to Britain. Syria and Lebanon went to France. Early in 1916, the British and French met secretly, with two diplomats, Mark Sykes and François-Georges Picot, leading the discussions, and agreed a division of the spoils at the war's end. It was a matter of what the winners coveted. Britain wanted to protect its oil supplies and gain more in taking Iraq, as well as control trade routes to India, whilst France hoped to extend their influence in the region too. However, a separate agreement was made in 1915 by the British High Commissioner in Egypt, who gave written promises of post-war independence for Arabs, though not including the coastlines of Lebanon and Syria, nor the provinces of Baghdad and Basra. This would be in return for an Arab revolt against the Turks. In late 1917, the Bolsheviks would publish copies of both these secret deals, much to the embarrassment of the British and the French. And another contradictory agreement was to be made before the war's end in November 1917 with the Balfour Declaration and the promise of a Jewish national home in Palestine. But more of that in a minute. I would add here that you can make reference to today's awful problems in the region. It is a long-term impact, and it is the legacy of this war and this peace treaty. Just don't go into too much detail. Now, let me just add a little detail to the Palestinian Mandate, because it is rooted in our time frame. In November 1917, the British, in the Balfour Declaration, promised a Jewish national home in Palestine. This would not be a recognised state, but a homeland with the greatest possible autonomy, though with guarantees given to protect the civil and religious rights of non-Jews. The obvious problem, other than the fact that other contradictory agreements had been made, one of them directly with the Arabs, was that Palestine, as it existed in 1917, had a population of some 700,000, of which barely 6% were Jews. There were some Christians, but the overwhelming majority were Arab and Muslim, and they were understandably furious. An American fact-finding mission, the King Crane Commission, after visiting the region, recommended that the idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine be dropped, but their recommendation was ignored. Instead, in an agreement made in April 1920, outside of the peace conferences in Paris, the British and French met privately and agreed that Britain would receive the Palestine Mandate and would implement the Balfour Declaration. In a sign of much worse things to come, anti-Jewish riots broke out in Jerusalem. No matter, Jews were invited to emigrate to the region, and within 2 decades the number of Jews living there had grown tenfold, from less than 50,000 to 500,000. So, I think some useful detail for you there. And on this last slide, you'll see Armenia and Kurdistan on the map. Along with the final settlement for Turkey, I'll pick this up in my second presentation. Now don't forget, there's my website, History Made Easier. Do check that out if you haven't already. It's there to help you too. But for now, as always, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.